Hello and welcome to the This Awesome Life podcast, a collection of stories that point to purpose. I'm Brandon and I have an awesome life, but that's not that special because so do you. In every episode of This Awesome Life, we talk to a friend and listen to their story. We hear about the moments in which God pointed them forward in their calling. Today on the show, I've got my friend Joel Yates. Joel serves on the team at Christ in Youth out of Joplin, Missouri. CIY partners with the local church to create moments and conversations that call young people to follow Jesus and into lives of kingdom work. Joel has an awesome story about trusting God when things change. So let's dive in, explore his story, and celebrate this awesome life. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the This Awesome Life podcast. Before we jump into today's conversation, I just wanted to tell you that my new book, Magic in the Mug, is releasing in just a few weeks. Now, before it releases, I want to give you an opportunity to preview what it's all about. It's all about how a single cup of coffee can help you discover your unique purpose. If you want a preview, go over to magicinthemug.com. There you can download all of chapter 1 and get started reading now before it releases here in just a few weeks. So head over to magicinthemug.com, download the preview, get started. Can't wait to share this book with you. I hope to see you there. Well, hello. Like I said, we are here with my good friend Joel. Man, Joel, it's just been awesome over the last what's it been? A couple of years at this point that we've sort of known each other through camps and things like that. Time, man, that's crazy. Time flies. I was about to say a couple of months, but then I was like, wait, I think it's been quite a while longer than that. And it's just, I'm getting older and I don't want time to keep going at the rate it's going. So, man, that's fun. Good times. Way to start it off, you know? Anyway, Joel's one of my good friends. I think what really kicked off this relationship was when we both realized like how into shoes we were, you know, because we kind of knew each other a little bit, and then it was like, your shoes? All right, let's chat. And so, yeah, man, what's new in the collection these days? Anything?
Yeah, man. So I have recently picked up a pair of Wave Runners. So if any of you guys are big into Yeezys and things like that, there's the Adidas Yeezy like Boost 700 Wave Runners.
Yeah.
I've had my eye on those for a very long time now, and just they're fun. They're super colorful.
Yeah.
I'm usually like kind of more into kind of like mellow stuff that's not super colorful. So sometimes it's fun to throw in something different. But yeah, it's actually really funny that you mentioned kind of the shoe side of things, because I was talking to my wife today and I was just like, hey, I'm doing a podcast with a buddy. And haven't really done a ton of this kind of stuff before. And and I was like, I have some notes if like you want to look over them. Like I've told you this story before, but you just tell me what you think. And she's just like, wait, you're like talking about like a story? She's like, I totally thought that you guys were just talking about shoes. I was like,
awesome.
No, but that's a great idea for a podcast. We should totally do a podcast where we just talk about shoes.
No joke. That sounds fun. All right. You heard it here first, folks. We'll get that. It's in development. Man, that's so awesome. So, hey, Joel, thanks again for being here, man. I'm excited, like I said, to hear part of your story, but why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, man, I can totally do that. So thanks for having me. My name's Joel, work at a organization in Joplin, Missouri. Kind of get to do some pretty cool and just fun things, working with a ton of churches. So the organization's called Christ in Youth. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit more,
for sure.
Just as we kind of get into our conversation, but really just get to work with some really awesome people like Brandon and just across the country that just have a heart for students, and get to partner with a ton of really cool people and some really cool local churches. So I've been doing that for a little over 5 years. I'm married. I've been married for a little over 3 years. My wife, Kinsey, she's awesome. We're both from the St. Louis area.
Awesome.
And Joplin's about 4 hours from St. Louis. So just like far enough to be able to like have a little bit of distance from family, but close enough for them to be able to come visit their grandbaby, because we just had our son Maverick in August last year. So
nice.
That has been occupying our time and that adjustment, and it's been the coolest thing ever, and also one of the hardest things ever.
Yeah. That's, man, I remember when my kiddos were that age, I sort of remember it, you know, and it's like,
sort of.
everything's getting new all of a sudden. Like they're getting mobile and starting to kind of figure out what they want to do and where they want to go. And
Right.
yeah, but hey, sleep is on the way back up, right?
Hey, we're going in the right direction.
There you go.
We still got a little progress to make, but gosh, it's going much better than it was the first few weeks.
I hear that. I hear that. Well, that's awesome, man. Congrats on the new edition. I love it.
Thanks,
Love
dude.
it. So, hey, we talk about purpose here a lot. We talk about and we talk about how we can find our purpose by navigating our own stories. Some of the stories we've heard have been the big things, and some of the stories we've talked about have been the little random things. And man,
Sure.
I love both of those, and I think that both have space in our life to point us to purpose. So I'm excited for you to join us today. I'd love to hear just kind of part of your story and what you learned from it and how God sort of showed up in that to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, man. No, whenever you asked this, I was really excited. Just even thinking about kind of recently how God's kind of been working in my life, and just thinking about like the significance of, like you said, not only the big moments in our lives, but also like just the small mundane moments, and the where it might seem like everything's just kind of just in autopilot, right?
Yeah,
But just being able to know that, like, hey, our God works in really small things, and He works in really big ways too, and just kind of how that's one big cohesive collective part of our story,
yeah.
is really cool. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to just dive in, or of kind of what story looks like, or if you had another question before we kind of get rolling.
No, man, go for it. You take it from here.
Okay. Yeah, sweet. Let's do it. So yeah, I was thinking, whenever you'd asked like a story that, has had an impact on my life, or
Yeah.
just led me kind of to where I was today. And there's a couple stories that stuck out, but one that I can think of that just might be fun to share, I've told a lot of friends, is just from a couple of years ago. Before I was living in Joplin, I was living up in Springfield, Missouri, which is about an
Okay.
hour from Joplin. And
Gotcha.
I Springfield's got like a really close place in my heart. It was a really big, that kind of place for me and my story, kind of the first place that I really felt like I got to choose, like, to call home.
Yeah.
Um, some people, Springfield definitely gets a bad rap sometimes. I think that like some comedian referenced it like in like one of his stand up things as the armpit of America.
Okay.
And I'm
Good
just like, it
times.
might be that for you, but for me, it was a really cool place. So like I was maybe a year out of school, living up there. And I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but just life post college is kind of weird at first. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of like feel like you're an adult, but like you kind of also like, am I really an adult? Like,
Yeah. Am I though?
100%, 100%. It's just like you might be doing okay, or you might be like me and like have pretty much no money and not a ton of experience, and friends are kind of off going to their own thing. So I mean,
Yeah.
it just can be adjustment, you know,
Absolutely.
um, in a bunch of different levels. So I kind of got to a place in it was the summer of 2017 where I really felt like I was like, okay, I feel like I'm starting to get into a good rhythm, and feel like God was just kind of putting some pieces together. Had like good community. Was active serving in my local church. Just kind of wrapping up grad school, and I even had a little bit of extra cash at this point where I could like
Watch out.
not be, yeah, 100%. It's just like, hey, sneaker time.
Yeah.
No, it was more like extra cash, like I can afford coffee with my friends after school,
There you go.
that kind of thing. So like really, it felt like things were in a good place. And this is, I feel like, a big part of, I even maybe some of the stories that you've heard. There's just these pivotal moments where something changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So something changed, and it's kind of funny just how there are times in our lives where we kind of feel like we start to have things figured out, and then just something
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah.
you know you have a kid,
Yep. I've been there.
you make a move, you start a new job, like all these different things. It's just like, oh boy, I've
Yeah.
still got a lot to figure out.
Yeah.
um so always, our God loves to keep us humble, and boy do we need it.
Yeah. For sure.
um so I was kind of visiting. I mentioned I was from St. Louis. Was visiting family, and actually on my way back to Springfield, I even like remember the day. I remember it was like the first Wednesday in June, um, and it's kind of funny. I was passing Six Flags St. Louis,
Okay.
which, if anyone is listening, that's from Eureka, Missouri. they're going to be like, hey, it's in Eureka, not St. Louis. Stop calling it Six Flags St. Louis. It's like 40 minutes from St. Louis.
Yeah.
Um, but the odds are no one listening is from Eureka, Missouri,
Yeah, there you go.
if that says anything about that town. But
Yeah, there you
um,
go.
yeah, so I was on my way back to Springfield and just felt like I really felt like he was speaking clearly to me that just a big change was coming for me. Um,
Mm,
it wasn't like audible. That'd be sweet. That'd be
there
like
you
really
go.
cool and like
Especially in a
really
place like
scary.
Eureka. I mean, it practically writes itself at that point.
I know, right? It's funny. So, but it was just like I really did feel confident that I was like, okay, I feel like God's speaking to me right now.
Hmm.
That's about something's about to change. And one thing about Joel, especially back like in 2017, is Change and I were like not best buds.
Mm, I hear you.
you
I
know,
got that.
I don't know if like anyone can relate to that. So that's definitely been like a growth area for me recently. But at the time, Change and I we just didn't really get along, and it didn't make a ton
Yeah.
of sense to me. Um, and I felt like I was finally at a place where it's like, okay, God, I feel like I'm where you want me to be. Um, so why do I feel like a big change is coming? And then what I found is like, okay, God's got a different plan, and that's what I've just continued to learn more and more. God's got a different plan than what we have for our lives.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes those things can align, and other times He's like, I'm pulling you in a different direction. And
Right.
kind of the next day, I got pulled in a different direction, and I lost my job.
Oh,
So
good
that was
times.
yeah, just me and Shane, just like super
Yeah.
close, right?
Yeah.
So
You're like,
I
when you
was
said change was coming,
yeah,
I didn't know that it would be like this big or sudden. Yeah.
100%. It was just like 16 hours later, like I put my head on pillow that I did laundry, put my head on my pillow that night, and then next morning, it's like 8:05 a.m. Hey, we're gonna let you off, like that kind of thing.
Ugh.
Um, so it was crazy. And the thing about my job was, it wasn't like a dream job. I was in school, but it paid my tuition,
Yeah.
and like basically like made sure I was not gonna get evicted and I could afford groceries.
There
Like
you
that
go.
kind of thing.
And the occasional
Um,
coffee after school.
and the occasional coffee after school. So anyway, 23-year-old Joel who loves a plan, doesn't get along with change. I just didn't take it very well. I mean, I pretty sure I'm also pretty emotional, dude. So like, I'm pretty sure I
Okay.
just like broke
Yeah.
down in front of my boss
Yeah.
right there, and she's like not up, like high on the emotional spectrum. She's like pretty stale,
Oh,
and she's just like
okay.
thinking probably like, what am I gonna do with this
Yeah.
guy?
Don't get your tears on
um,
my desk.
100%. But and I know I'm dramatic. Like I could be a little dramatic here, but what like younger Joel learned was that even when things might seem random, things don't seem like they don't make sense. Like the God that we serve, the God that I serve, knows what I need before I even ask for it, and He knows the direction that He's taking me.
Yeah.
So it's really funny. Like the very next day, so right, we were talking Wednesday, felt the change. Thursday, lost my job. On Friday, one of my buddies from church posted just a picture on Instagram of him playing in a band for an event. So he's
Okay.
like worship pastor in my local church,
Gotcha.
and that event was called CIY Move. Um, and I just like DM'd him and asked him like, hey, like this event looks super cool. Like, what is it? Can you tell me more about it? And so I ended up like just going to CIY's website, trying to learn more. And after just learning some more and contemplating kind of what I was learning, um, just praying and then just even some conversations with some close friends, I was like, there's a job open that like I think I really would be interested in this. Um, and I know I talked really briefly earlier about kind of what CIY does, but for anyone listening that really doesn't know a ton, that was like me back in 2017, kind of what CIY does, we exist to create moments where students can just experience the gospel and kind of hear the call to be a kingdom worker.
Yeah.
When in Scripture tells us about how God's prepared good works in advance for us, that's what we want to do, and we want to do that through events, trips, and resources, all about the local church.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So I had always like loved students, but didn't necessarily like have a ministry background. I was like studying business in school, um, and actually wanting to kind of work in the digital marketing space, kind of for like a Nike or a Jordan brand. That was kind of the dream,
Yeah.
but felt like God was pulling me a different direction, and just thought it'd be such a cool opportunity to be able to work alongside youth workers who kind of share that same love that I had for just students.
Yeah.
Um, so that was kind of what led to just several rounds of interviews. what felt like a really long process, even for multiple jobs, actually, kind
Yeah.
of how it worked out. Let's just say like whenever pretty much all of CIY staff is on the road in like just completely different parts of the country in the summer, that's not the best time to apply for a job. If you're listening and you ever want to apply for a
Right.
job at CIY, the summer is a tough time.
Yeah.
So
Hit us
I
up in
ended up
October. Yeah.
on. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I ended up accepting a job on the team I work on now, which is just called the church relations team. Actually, a couple minutes before I was like walking in to give a final presentation for like grad school. So
Nice.
it's just even funny timing. So God had a different plan, and even despite like the fear that I was, experiencing, like first experiencing and feeling about like what was next, and fear of the unknown, over time, and just I began to just experience peace with whatever it was that He was calling me to next, and just felt like, okay, it's gonna. I feel like it's all gonna work out exactly how He wants it to, even
Yeah.
if it doesn't make sense to me or it's not in the timing that I want. So that obviously led to what you all have already heard. I've been at CIY for over 5 years now, and since coming on, and this kind of where we can talk a little bit more about what I learned from this whole hodgepodge of a story.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and it's that, man, I've just grown a ton, like personally, spiritually, and even like professionally too. And there's a huge heart for that here, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Um, I've developed strong relationships not only with my coworkers, but um, tons of amazing churches, guys like you, uh, girls that are killing it in youth ministry, tons of youth workers.
Yeah.
I met my wife uh, pretty shortly after making the move to Joplin. Mentioned we have an amazing, right now, 7-month-old baby boy. We've got a pretty cool dog too, so you got to throw that in.
There you go.
And Yup, and man, we've got it. Like we just feel like we've built kind of a home here, and just have friends and relationships, people that are in our corner, and all of that started with God just having a completely different plan than we ever
Yeah.
could have expected.
Yeah.
You know, um, so that's really kind of the big piece. That's the story. Um, I don't know if you want to talk, if you have any questions of kind of. I threw a ton at you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good.
But
That's
yeah,
good.
man.
No, that's awesome, man. I think that one of the key things you said there was, um, we often expect like things to go one way, but sometimes God has a different plan. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's important to kind of talk about. You said you kind of experienced this feeling of a change was coming, right? And then it was the next day when the change like hit. How did that like? How did you kind of walk through that? It's kind of like somebody tells you that something's going to happen, and you're like, yeah, okay, I can kind of mentally prepare for that, and then it happens, and it feels like this is all new. You know what I mean? Like it
Oh
still
yeah.
feels like I never saw this coming. So how did you kind of like walk through that season, especially knowing that it was a little while? You said you saw the Instagram post that the next day, but obviously there was a process where during that time you had no idea what was what was coming next, or you know what I mean?
Right.
How did you walk through that gracefully at times, or how did you, even if you didn't walk through it gracefully at certain points?
Sure.
I'd just love to hear that process a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I'll say, like, I'll just start right off the get go, and I think everybody can relate to this. Like, it's never easy whenever you're walking into a position where you experience a change, even if it's one that's exciting. Like, change is hard. Um, our brains aren't wired to do things that they're not used to doing, you know?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
one thing that my brain wasn't used to doing was just like taking my thoughts captive.
Mm,
Um, and so, I can even think of a buddy that actually we were just talking about him. So, my buddy Dan that I was telling you about recently, him and I played a lot of basketball while I was in grad school, kind of at Evangel where I graduated my undergrad.
okay.
And every time we play pickup basketball, he would just be like, "Hey, man, like, how's the process like with the CIY job coming? Like, how are things going? Do you know anything? And how are things moving along?" And I noticed after several times of him asking that, like my first thought or my first like gut reaction would be like disappointment, because I felt like I had to tell him that I didn't know where we were at in that process yet. It's just like
Right.
I'm waiting to hear back, or I don't know, or I had my last interview 2 weeks ago, and followed up, but just haven't gotten the ball moved down the court yet.
Yeah.
Um, and so I started to learn. It's like, oh my gosh, it can be so quick for the enemy just to step in and take the tens of thousands of thoughts that we have every single day and just twist the truth just enough to where we begin to doubt just what God might want to do,
Yeah.
and begin to doubt the people that we are and that He's made us to be. So that was just a huge thing for me, and I've just noticed even still I am not good. I'm not claiming to be an expert, of just taking those thoughts captive, but gosh, just whenever you can have a little bit of that, like on the forefront of your mind, like where's this thought coming from? Is this thought edifying? Is this thought uplifting? Is this thought coming from something that is maybe rooted in truth, or is this thought coming from something that may not be rooted in truth?
Right. That's so good, man. Um, it's just good stuff. I had a thought there for a second of something that he said, and then of course I lost it. So, hey, that's fun.
It's hard
but
when you
yeah,
work with people like long-winded like me.
no way. Man, I think it's so good. Yeah. The waiting in that process, I feel like would be the hardest thing, like, oh, I had an interview 2 weeks ago and haven't really heard anything much since. Like that would kill me. I would be like calling every day, sending like letters in the mail,
Oh yeah.
like, how did you handle that? Like just being patient in the process.
Yeah. I bet I didn't handle it as gracefully as I probably could have.
Yeah,
I'll definitely say that,
that's fair.
gosh, like I would say that in that season, I still was working like a part-time job, so I wasn't
Yeah.
homeless. Let's start there. Like,
Yeah, that's good.
but what I'd say is that I began to learn um, that like even whenever like we may not have exactly what we want, and we may not have it in the time frame that we might want it, that God always has a way that He shows up,
Yeah.
whether it's through relationships, whether it's through community, whether it's through family, whether it's through opportunities. And here I am today, So
Yeah. Yeah.
even though it was crazy and it was really hard at the time, and it was even discouraging at times, like I mentioned earlier, like I just had this piece was like, you know what, I know the God I serve, and I know that He's going to end up having His way, one way or the other, whether it is in line with how I might want it to be. So that's one thing I've just tried to latch onto a ton is like, okay, God, like
Yeah.
if this is in line with where you're calling me to, and in a way that you want to use me, then it will be done. And if it isn't, then we'll see what's next.
Yeah. That's so good, man. What do you think? And this is, yeah, it's a question. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
What do you think is something that you learned in that process, right? That is like a key thing for you right now where you're at, like a tool that was given to you during that time that you use now on a regular basis?
That's a great question. It's a really great question. What I feel like one of the biggest things that I learned specifically like in this season of my life, and that I feel like I've even carried um, into recent years, and even noticed
Yeah.
even more and more recently this year, is just that like whenever I'm like making my best moves, and making the best choices, it's typically not whenever like I'm like stepping in the driver's seat, it's whenever
Mm.
I'm taking a step back and giving God space to just kind of guide me. I feel like it's so easy for us just to get in the way of what God may want to do in our lives, our hearts, our relationships, and things like that. And that's one thing I really love about what you're doing with this podcast is you're trying to help people see and just highlight the awesome moments, whether they're big or small in their story. And I feel like that's kind of just like taking a step back, right? And
Mm.
giving God that space to see where God has worked in that space, whether it's our lives, and watching how His different plan that He has ultimately is drawing us closer to Him.
Yeah. That's so good, man. I think at the beginning when you talked about kind of you wanted to work in the sneaker business, I
Yeah.
came up wanting to be a musician. Like I I wanted to hit it big. I wanted to go on tour. I wanted the tour bus, all that kind of stuff. And
Okay.
I clung to that for so long, and God had such a different plan. And
Hmm.
his plan was so much better. You know what I mean? And here I sit
Yeah.
now, like thankful. I had some opportunities in that world that just never seemed to quite line up. You know what I mean? Something would always just I felt like I missed it by this much, like so many times. And I look back now and I'm like, man, thank you, God, for orchestrating the things the way that you did. It didn't feel good at the time. It hurt at the time, and I was just like, oh, again, another closed door. And yet he was so faithful through it all to kind of bring me to where I want to be. I can't imagine what my life would look like if one of those
Yeah.
opportunities had hit and I'd gone in that direction instead of where he's called me to today. I'm so, man, it's good. It's good stuff.
That crazy. It's so crazy just because, you know, the the thing that's funny about God is that he ultimately knows like what is going to draw us closer to him, you know.
Yeah.
And that's been something that has been like just really on my heart recently is just what does closeness to Jesus look like in my life, you know? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and for some people, they might feel like that's really easy, and for some people, they might even feel like that's unreachable, or they're somewhere in between. Um, but just like even whenever we were talking about doing this podcast and just looking back at my own story, I was reminded and just looking over Proverbs and in chapter 16 and verse 9, it talks about how we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like that's something that is present in my story. I feel like hearing you talk about kind of your hopes for this world of the music industry and pursuing that. Um, we might have plans of where we want and think our life is best going to be served.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the Lord is going to determine what our steps are.
Yeah.
So that's something I've been asking myself recently is like, what does it look like for me to take one step closer to Jesus today? Um, because one step closer today is one step closer than I was yesterday,
Right.
right?
That's good.
So just trying to keep it simple,
Yeah.
because we don't like complicated, right?
No, no.
Like if it's tough to replicate what's complicated, but man, if we can keep things simple and just say, how do I take one step closer to him today?
Yeah.
Um, it's crazy what good he can do of something so small and so simple.
That's good stuff, man. Well, Joel, man, I really appreciate you sharing part of your story with us today. And I feel like there's so many good truths in here that are going to help people move forward and towards their purpose as well. Dude. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. And I'm just excited to see you moving forward with all of that and just really living out who God's called you to. It's awesome. So thanks, man.
Yeah, dude, it was super fun chatting with you.
Yeah, same. We'll see you.
See you, Brandon.
I really appreciated hanging out with Joel today. It's been so good to hear his story about how he dealt with that change and how he was able to stay faithful through the process. I know for me, I get impatient. I hate waiting. I hate wondering what's happening next. I hate not knowing if things are moving forward or if they're moving backwards. Neutral is just not a place I like to camp out. It's a hard spot to be in, and yet it's possible for us to walk through those seasons with patience and grace. Those are not things that come to us naturally as humans. They're things that we have to learn to develop over time. And that's with any discipline. I love what Joel said there at the end about how important it is for him to figure out today how he can get one step closer to Jesus. He said keeping things simple is so key. I'll tell you a little story about keeping things simple. My wife and I recently decided that we needed to lose a couple of pounds, and so we tried everything. We tried so many fad diets, complicated things, systems of, restrictive diets, all that kind of stuff, and it was not successful. It was so hard to keep up with where we needed to be, with the things that we could or couldn't eat. We get invited out with friends, and we're trying to scan these menus to try to figure out what can we even have, and it never took. It never took. In fact, it made it worse. It made it harder for us to get our eating habits under control. And then I read an article that said if you simply track your food and weigh yourself every day, that the stat was something like 70 or 80% of people lose weight just by doing that, just by tracking their food and weighing themselves every day. Because all of a sudden this awareness of what I'm putting into my body becomes front of the mind. And so 15 days, 20 days in to that, I looked at the scale one morning and realized I lost 6 pounds. I hadn't done anything else. I didn't exercise. I didn't even try to change the things that I was eating. I eat candy and stuff still, but because I'm tracking it, instead of eating an entire bag of Starburst jelly beans, I eat one serving of Starburst jelly beans, which is 20, by the way. It's pretty good. It's not bad for 100 calories. Anyway, when we started keeping things simple, we got better at it. When we decided we were going to move forward with small steps instead of trying to, be that story of like, oh, I lost 60 pounds in a month. That's not going to happen. But taking a small step forward every day has helped us make tremendous progress. A lot of times we get stuck looking at how far we still have to go when we need to also take into consideration how far we've come. I'm still a ways away from my goals, but I'm way closer to them than I was when I started. And that's worth celebrating. And I think that as we keep it simple and as we move forward with Jesus, if we ask, what step can I take towards him today? We're going to wake up one day and we're going to realize we're way closer to him than we've ever been before. And so I hope you found this encouraging. I know I did. Thank you for being a part of the This Awesome Life community. If you want to stay connected in further ways, check the show notes. We got some resources down there. You can subscribe to the This Awesome Life blog, connect with me on social media, or check out some of the other things that I've got going on. I really, really enjoy this. I love having these conversations. I hope you're enjoying them too. But we will see you on the next episode of This Awesome Life.